Just to circle back on New York 3, not to beat a dead horse here, but obviously you were stressing the evidence provided by past elections. I'm curious if you think, given the circumstances that led us to New York 3 special election and the extraordinary George Santos story, if there's any evidence that will provide actually about 2024 in November. And then separately, curious what your response is to Elise Stefanik echoing the use of the word hostages to describe January 6ers.
Well, Elise Stefanik should be ashamed of herself. That no decent, rational, credible individual, particularly folks who were here on January 6th when the violent insurrection took place or are closely connected to the institution of Congress, should claim that the violent insurrectionists who attacked and brutally beat police officers are hostages. Extreme MAGA Republicans have become captive of Donald Trump's radical ideology and are parroting his words, his thoughts, and his ideas. The real question is, why haven't House Republicans in New York, like Mike Lawler or others, denounced Elise Stefanik? And why do they continue to rely on her fundraising support in order to try to fool the voters in New York and pretend like they believe in moderation?
If I can go back to sort of the discussion you were just having about Tom Suozzi and what's currently happening in the House. They currently have 2 vote margin, the Republicans do. If with the departure of Bill Johnson, it's going to stay the same, but if Suozzi wins and comes back and Higgins remains, they'll go down to a 1 vote margin. Have you had any conversations with Brian Higgins about staying longer to sort of tighten up those margin of error for the Republicans?
Yeah, I have not had that conversation with Congressman Higgins. It's also not my understanding that he's put a precise, definitive date on his departure. And it's a reasonable conversation, at least in the short term, for Democrats and Republicans to figure out how we can govern in an enlightened way that will benefit the American people that we serve. And what is clear is that the only way to get things done for the American people in the House of Representatives is through a bipartisan governing coalition. That's the only way forward. At this point, House Republicans can't organize a 2-car funeral. They can't do it. They can't even pass their own rule. And so it's not clear to me how anything gets done unless traditional Republicans come to the conclusion that they have to break from the MAGA extremists and join Democrats in governing in an enlightened, bipartisan way to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. Go back to this slide.
It's now my honor to yield 1 minute to the dynamic, distinguished, and dedicated Democratic leader, Mr. Jeffries from New York.
New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me thank my distinguished colleague from the great state of Oregon, Representative Bonamici, for her tremendous advocacy and for yielding some time. I rise today in strong opposition to this reckless and regressive Republican effort to undermine women's health care. House Republicans have begun this year the same way that they ended last year, targeting women's reproductive freedom. The distinction between Democrats and extreme MAGA Republicans on the abortion care issue couldn't be any clearer. House Democrats believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. It's a decision that should be between a woman, her family, and her doctors. Not extreme MAGA Republicans trying to intervene and indoctrinate and influence young women on college campuses all across America. We believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. What House Republicans want to do is to criminalize abortion care. House Republicans want to impose a nationwide abortion ban. House Republicans want to undermine reproductive freedom. And that's what the underlying bill that's on the floor right now is all about. Nothing more and nothing less. If the legislation that is under consideration was really about improving the opportunity for the children, the infants, the babies of America to live a healthy life, then extreme MAGA Republicans would join Democrats in our efforts to bring that about. House Democrats are trying to address the challenges around infant mortality in America. Extreme MAGA Republicans refuse to join us. House Republicans could be working to deal with the challenges around child poverty in America, but they refuse to join House Democrats in our efforts to go back to the transformative child tax credit that was part of the 2021 American Rescue Plan. House Democrats are working to deal with the problem of child hunger in America, but extreme MAGA Republicans are trying to cut nutritional assistance for children and families in our great country. So how dare you come to the House floor to lecture America about healthy infants, healthy babies, healthy children, when you're doing everything in your power to do exactly the opposite? The notion that this bill has anything to do with transparency and providing information to young women on college campuses all across America is undermined by the fact that the Democratic amendments that were offered to provide a comprehensive set of information to women were consistently rejected. Extreme MAGA Republicans rejected any effort to make sure that young women on college campuses were provided information about the full range of reproductive health care. Extreme MAGA Republicans rejected the effort to provide the young women of America with information about the dangers of a miscarriage. Extreme MAGA Republicans rejected the efforts by House Democrats to make sure that the young women of America were provided information about contraceptives. Why? Because House Republicans have only one objective: a nationwide abortion ban. And this legislation is part of that effort. And that's why instead of the Congress dealing with issues related to the economy or housing or inflation or public safety or health care, House Republicans have us voting on bills to undermine a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And so I strongly urge everyone to reject this extreme piece of legislation and join us in trying to uplift women, children, and families in America. And our promise to the country is as follows. House Democrats will stand strongly behind reproductive freedom today. We will stand strongly behind reproductive freedom tomorrow. We will stand strongly behind a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions forever until we crush the extreme MAGA Republican effort to criminalize abortion care. I yield back.
Gentleman,
Mr. Leader, the Senate is obviously still negotiating the supplemental package, which would include border funding in Ukraine and Israel. But Speaker Johnson seems to be not interested in whatever they deliver before the text is even revealed. This despite the fact that there does appear to be enough both Republicans and Democrats to pass the legislation if it were to make it to the House. Have you and your colleagues discussed any effort to try and bring this legislation to the floor outside of the Speaker, a discharge petition, something along those lines, and how urgent do you think this need is? And then secondarily, if it emerges in a situation where the border package is something that Speaker Johnson just won't move on, do you believe that that should be separate from Ukraine and Israel in a separate package?
Well, there are 3 steps to this process. First, we need to evaluate what comes out of the Senate, if indeed an agreement is reached, have a family discussion about the best way to proceed if there is legislation before us sent over from the United States Senate, and third, enter into a course of action designed to make sure we are delivering real results and solving problems for the American people, as opposed to playing partisan political games. For months, the American people were lectured by the extreme MAGA Republicans about the need to deal with some of the challenges at the border. House Democrats, President Biden, Senate Democrats are ready, we are willing, we are able to work together to address the challenges at the border and fix our broken immigration system. It should be done in a comprehensive, bipartisan, humane fashion. That's President Biden's commitment. That's the Senate Democratic commitment. That's our commitment. Lectured for months about issues at the border. National security funding held up by extreme MAGA Republicans who tied funding for Ukraine, and that's a war that's all about democracy and freedom on the one hand, autocracy and tyranny on the other. And we, as Americans, always stand on the side of democracy and freedom, held up Ukraine funding because of the border, and now they're against the legislative effort that they themselves were apparently for months ago. Why? Because the extreme MAGA Republicans who have taken over the Republican Party are not concerned with solving problems. They are not concerned with making life better for the American people, and they certainly are not concerned with delivering real results. And that's a shame. It's a shame.
Would you be open to separating them, though, sir, if it comes to that?
It's a conversation that we'll have to have as part of a family discussion, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Vice Chair Lieu, for your very generous words of introduction, for your leadership. Thank you, Chairman Aguilar, for once again convening us here as House Democrats for the 2024 Issues Conference. In my previous capacity as Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, I had the opportunity to preside over and put together, along with Catherine and then Pete, 4 different issues conference events. I'm glad to yield that responsibility to Chairman Aguilar, who's doing an incredible job. It's also an honor to be here with the distinguished leadership team who you will hear from as we gather united, committed, and energized about the opportunities in front of us to continue to put people over politics, finish the job that we started in the last Congress, build a healthy economy, grow our middle class, of course, continue to fight for lower costs and for safer communities. The events of this week have once again established that there's a clear contrast between House Democrats and our extreme MAGA Republican counterparts. House Democrats will continue to choose common sense solutions to solving problems on behalf of hardworking American families. House Republicans continue to choose chaos. House Democrats will continue to defend our democracy. House Republicans continue to choose dysfunction. And House Democrats will continue to work on the economy and making life better for everyday Americans, while House Republicans continue to choose extremism. When we emerge from this conference, we'll continue to have a clear plan of action. We look forward to interacting with President Biden, Vice President Harris, members of the administration, advocates, and stakeholders from all across the country with a clear vision for the mission that is in front of us to continue to deliver for the American people. And now it's my great honor to yield to one of my classmates and good friends, partners in leadership, who has proven that she knows how to count and she knows how to unify Democrats on behalf of the American people. I yield to our distinguished whip, Catherine Clark.
If you could just speak a little bit to kind of the vote yesterday, both really high-profile messaging priorities for the GOP's leadership, Israel. Could you speak a little bit to managing the coalition there? What do you see as the problem? You're a leader of a coalition, and you studied under perhaps one of the greatest coalition leaders in modern history, under Nancy Pelosi. What do you see from the outside looking in? Give us a little bit of a diagnostic here.
Well, correction, the greatest legislative leader, in our view, in American political history, and that continues to be proven over and over and over again by the Republican dysfunction. Under House Democrats, we had the same exact margins in the last Congress. The same exact margins. Republicans have produced chaos, dysfunction, and extremism under the same margins under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi. We produced the American Rescue Plan, shots in arms, money in pockets, kids back in school, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which will create millions of good-paying jobs and clean water in every single community. Gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years that will save lives. The CHIPS and Science Act to bring domestic manufacturing jobs back home to the United States of America. And the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment in combating the climate crisis in the history of the world, setting our planet on a sustainable trajectory forward, strengthening the Affordable Care Act, and driving down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs for millions of Americans, including taking the price of insulin from $4,000 a year to $35 a month. Democrats under the leadership of President Biden and Speaker Pelosi, partnering with Senate colleagues, were able to do all that with the same exact margin that Republicans have right now. As House Democrats, we actually care about governing. That's the difference. We are here to serve the American people, to get things done, to fix problems that the American people are facing, to put people over politics. And we're going to continue to fight for lower costs, to grow the middle class, to defend democracy, for reproductive freedom, and for safer communities. And in that quest, we will always have exuberant conversations with each other. We don't run away from that. We embrace it. But then at the end of the day, what we do on our side is to exercise common sense and find the highest common denominator so we can advance the ball for the American people and then live to fight another day with respect to what has been left behind. That's our approach. And it has worked for the American people. And this my way or the highway approach by the extreme MAGA Republicans is failing Good afternoon, everyone. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we will work with our Republican colleagues on any issue to find bipartisan common ground whenever and wherever possible in the best interests of the American people and in order to make life better for hardworking American taxpayers. Once again, Democrats have demonstrated our willingness to work together, do the right thing by the American people, and provide the overwhelming majority of votes necessary to get things done. And in this instance, fund the government, prevent a shutdown, and continue to work toward making sure we can arrive at a spending agreement that meets the needs of the American people in terms of their health, safety, and economic well-being. At the same time, what we see from extreme MAGA Republicans here in Washington and all across the country is an effort to take away reproductive freedom from the women of America. The extreme MAGA Republicans want a nationwide abortion ban. The extreme MAGA Republicans want to strip away the ability of women to seek fertility treatment. Extreme MAGA Republicans want to go after contraception. Extreme MAGA Republicans, at the end of the day, want and will stop at nothing in trying to jam their right-wing ideology down the throats of women and the American people. And House Democrats are going to continue to aggressively push back against their extremism.
Given the quorum from last night, is there some prospect for real bipartisanship before the next election within this Congress?
Well, we are going to continue to find bipartisan common ground, exercising common sense whenever and wherever possible with our Republican colleagues on any issue. And we've done that repeatedly from the very beginning of this Congress with respect to avoiding a catastrophic default on our nation's debt, funding the government, repeatedly keeping it open and avoiding a shutdown, passing the National Defense Authorization Act, securing $16 billion in assistance for communities that have been devastated by extreme weather events, passing tax legislation that includes the low-income housing tax credit and an enhanced child tax credit, and most recently, providing the majority of votes necessary to get the first 6 appropriations bills over the finish line. We are going to continue to govern in a common sense way, and we're just asking our Republican colleagues to stop the political stunts. That was an embarrassment last night. A complete embarrassment. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's basically running the House Republican Conference, shows up in campaign paraphernalia. And then these people want to lecture Joe Biden because he delivered a strong and forceful speech that made them uncomfortable because he exposed their lies and shamelessness. We have one message for extreme MAGA Republicans who want to lecture us about decorum. Get lost. You're a joke. Exhibit A, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Exhibit B, George Santos. Last question?
So there was data released by the nonpartisan TRAC that says approximately 200,000 deportation cases were thrown out because DHS did not file the necessary paperwork in time. Is that a concern at all, and should that be addressed here?
Yeah, I can't comment as to whether it's a concern or not because I haven't seen that particular report. The Biden administration is working hard under the circumstances that they confront and the limitation of resources that have been placed upon them to make sure that we have a secure, a strong, and a humane border. as Democrats, we've made clear repeatedly that we believe that we've got a broken immigration system and we've got serious challenges at the border that need to be addressed in a serious, common sense, and bipartisan manner, which unfortunately is not the approach that the extreme MAGA Republicans have taken, because at the direction of Donald Trump, the Republicans would rather weaponize the border issue politically in November as opposed to working with Democrats in a bipartisan, common sense way to solve it right now. And in this country, in this Congress, we need less chaos and more common sense. Unfortunately, this do-nothing Republican Congress has far too often specialized in chaos, dysfunction, and extremism, not problem solving. But we are ready, willing, and able to work on this issue in a serious fashion. We just need traditional Republicans to join us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Can I ask you about the idea of loaning Ukraine money for their aid package? I know you prefer the supplemental, but doesn't this seem like it could be a path that could actually work?
I don't prefer the supplemental. The only viable path forward is for House Republicans to take the national security, bipartisan, and comprehensive bill that was sent over by the Senate weeks ago and put it on the House floor for an up or down vote, so we can provide the security assistance necessary to our democratic allies in Israel, Ukraine, and in the Indo-Pacific, and at the same time meet the needs of Palestinian civilians who are in harm's way in Gaza through no fault of their own, and surge humanitarian assistance into the region and to other theaters of war across the world. We are past the 11th hour at this point in time. And House Republicans need to stop bending the knee to the pro-Putin faction that is growing and ascendant in their party, and do the right thing in terms of the national security needs of the American people. The Senate bill is bipartisan, it's comprehensive, and it's the only viable way forward.
Mr. Leader, we saw another ruling on abortion in Arizona further restricting the practice. Do you believe that these rulings in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned, does that expand your map when you're looking to take back the majority? And do you believe Donald Trump when he says that he would not sign a national abortion ban into law?
Donald Trump is lying. This is an individual who has said, along with the other extreme MAGA Republicans, that they are proud to have taken down Roe v. Wade. Donald Trump put 3 Supreme Court justices in place, several of whom, in my view, misrepresented their position before the United States Senate, claiming that Roe v. Wade was settled law. And then the first opportunity they had, took Roe v. Wade down and put the women of America in a position where abortion care has been criminalized in state after state after state. The extreme MAGA Republicans have been very clear. They do not believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. The only reason the former president is claiming to be for states' rights is because he knows he's not for women's rights when it comes to reproductive freedom. And he recognizes that he's in a politically vulnerable position. But there is absolutely zero reason to believe that the extreme MAGA Republicans, the first chance that they had with a Congress controlled by right-wing conservatives, and God help us all, a Republican president, would not impose a nationwide ban on abortion. It's what drives a significant number of the Republicans who are part of their base. If Roe v. Wade can fall after nearly 50 years, everything is on the table. And it's not just reproductive freedom. It's Social Security. It's Medicare. And many of us believe it's democracy itself.
Do you think that expands your map then, sir?
That's a question that we'll have to address on the non-governmental side. What is clear is that the women of America, the enlightened people of America, in November are going to express themselves loudly and clearly. And the Republicans who want to criminalize abortion care and who want to impose a nationwide ban are on the wrong side of this issue, the wrong side of history, and are likely to be on the wrong side of the election results. We can assess how we got to where we are once the national security legislation is voted on and completed in terms of the process in the House of Representatives. Our teams and the whip teams on both sides of the aisle are in constant communication about the whip counts as it relates to both procedural votes and substantive votes, and that was no different as it relates to the national security legislation. I did not speak directly to Mike Johnson about the numbers necessary because it was pretty obvious to us, given the growing number of pro-Putin Republicans in the GOP, particularly in the House of Representatives, that this was going to require substantial Democratic participation. And we had a choice. Were we going to put people over politics? Because the political thing to do is always to let the extreme MAGA Republicans crash and burn because they have so many out of control members, they cannot govern on their own. And we could let them simply crash and burn. But when we say we're going to continue to put people over politics, we actually mean it, particularly when it comes to meeting the needs of the American people, both domestically and in terms of our national security. And we're going to continue to do just that. Second row. Side. Thanks. Yeah, that's a declaration, not an observation, but that statement still stands. By the way, let me also... No, that's a declaration, not an observation. We'll have to have that conversation before the House caucus. But first things first, we still have to get the national security bills over the finish line. In that statement, that's what we made clear, that we have to do the business of the American people. We've been waiting for months, unnecessarily, because of gamesmanship and partisanship and brinksmanship on the other side of the aisle. First, the extreme MAGA Republicans said, we can't meet the national security needs of the American people until we make changes to border policy. And then the extreme MAGA Republicans killed a border policy bipartisan piece of legislation. Then we were told that the extreme MAGA Republicans could not address the national security needs of the American people until a spending bill was completed. Democrats provided the support necessary to make sure that we funded the government in a manner that was compassionate and comprehensive and met the needs of the American people. And then we went on to another excuse from the extreme MAGA Republicans. Third, we were told that the national security needs of the American people could not be met until we reauthorized the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Even though we were promised, after finishing the spending bill, that the first order of priority upon our return to Washington in April would be national security legislation. But we had to deal with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which Democrats once again helped get over the finish line. Extreme MAGA Republicans, as we have observed, are out of excuses, and the American people and our allies in Ukraine and throughout the world are out of time in terms of our national security needs being met. Hopefully we're on track for that to happen tomorrow. We've been very honest in our assessment of the situation from the very beginning, including in the declaration that I made in late February. And at the appropriate time, as House Democrats, we will have a conversation about how to deal with any hypothetical motion to vacate, which at this point hasn't been noticed. Moscow, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massey, and Gosar are quite a group, and I'm sure that will play some role in our conversation. But central to the conversation, the prerequisite to the conversation, is to make sure that the national security legislation in totality is passed by the House of Representatives. Good afternoon, everyone. Freedom is under assault here in America and throughout the world. As House Democrats, we believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And we strongly oppose any effort by extreme MAGA Republicans to criminalize abortion care, impose a nationwide ban, target women and physicians and medical professionals across the country, and try to impose government-mandated pregnancies, even in instances where there's been rape or incest. Freedom is under assault by the extreme MAGA Republicans, and ground zero at the moment is in Florida, where there is a ban that will impact millions of women in the state of Florida and throughout the Deep South. Because up until this point, Florida was perhaps the only state in the southeastern part of the country where a woman could seek reproductive health care. Freedom is under assault. House Democrats are defending it. Extreme MAGA Republicans are determined to undermine it. And Donald Trump and everyone who blindly follows him are responsible for what has taken place in this country as a result of the fall of Roe v. Wade and the attacks on freedom that have been underway ever since. Freedom under assault in America, freedom under assault across the world, particularly in Ukraine. which is why it was so critically important that we worked together to get the national security legislation that was bipartisan and comprehensive over the finish line and defeated the pro-Putin Republicans who were determined to undermine America's national security, undermine freedom and democracy throughout the world, and undermine American leadership in a way that would have hurt the safety and security of the American people, perhaps for decades to come, if Vladimir Putin and Russian aggression was allowed to prevail. Freedom under assault in America, freedom under assault throughout the world. Freedom will be on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Mr. Leader, Ralph Norman posited the other day that there must be some reason Democrats are treating Johnson differently than McCarthy. He was like, why would they do that unless there was a quid pro quo? What do you see as the difference between McCarthy and Johnson in this situation? And also, just on a purely schadenfreude basis, how much are you Democrats enjoying seeing Republicans in disarray like this?
We're going to continue to keep the focus on getting things done for the American people and delivering real results on their behalf. With respect to the decision that was collectively made on October 3rd, and the decision that has been made in connection with the current motion to vacate, Catherine Clark, Pete Aguilar, and myself issued a very thorough statement on October 3rd, laying out our rationale as to why we would vote against a motion to table in the prior instance. And we've also articulated in a very thorough way our rationale for why we've taken a different position at this point in time.
Speaker, I'll yield 1 minute now to our Democratic leader, Mr. Jeffries of New York.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the distinguished gentleman from the great state of New Jersey for yielding and for his tremendous leadership. The House of Representatives, of course, is the institution the framers designed to be the closest to the American people, the first institution mentioned in the United States Constitution, the People's House, the place where President Abraham Lincoln declared that America is the last best hope of Earth, the place where FDR made clear the importance of defending democracy against the tyranny of Nazi fascism. It's the place where President Lyndon Baines Johnson talked about the importance of the Voting Rights Act and made clear to America that we shall overcome. The House of Representatives is a special place. And so earlier today, I was told you need to get to the House floor to deal with the signature piece of legislation from the extreme MAGA Republicans in this 118th Congress. And so I wondered to myself, is it going to be about inflation, lower costs, housing affordability, public safety, dealing with the challenges at the border, Social Security, Medicare? What is it going to be about? And it turns out the signature piece of legislation for the extreme MAGA Republicans this week, this month, this year is hands off our Home Appliances Act. This is what we are dealing with on this magical House floor with all of the challenges that the American people are confronting. Liberty for laundry, defending the dignity of dishwashers, fighting for freedom of refrigerators. This is what we're doing? Can't make it up. You can't make it up. As House Democrats, we are going to defend democracy. Extreme MAGA Republicans working on defending the dignity of dishwashers. As House Democrats, we are going to protect and strengthen Social Security. Extreme MAGA Republicans apparently interested in protecting gas stoves against phony accusations of oppression. House Democrats are going to defend reproductive freedom. Extreme MAGA Republicans focused on the freedom for refrigerators. We believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. Period. Full stop. In women's health care, in protecting the women of America against extreme MAGA Republican overreach. And instead of leaning into the protection of reproductive freedom, instead of trying to strengthen Social Security and Medicare, you want to criminalize abortion care. You want to impose a nationwide ban. And then waste time on the House floor as it relates to the liberty of laundry. You can't make this up. And so I just urge my Republican colleagues to partner with us. If you want to push back against overreach, push back against the pro-Putin extreme overreach on your side of the aisle. It doesn't want to defend democracy and freedom here and abroad. It's undermining it. And we extend the hand of partnership, as we've repeatedly done, to solve real problems for the American people. But those problems have nothing to do with the dignity of dishwashers, the freedom of refrigerators, or the liberty of laundry. Let's get back to doing the real business of the American people. Vote no against this legislation. Evening, everybody. Our decision to stop Marjorie Taylor Greene from plunging the House of Representatives and the country into further chaos is rooted in our commitment to solve problems for everyday Americans in a bipartisan manner. We need more common sense and less chaos in Washington, D.C. Marjorie Taylor Greene and extreme MAGA Republicans are chaos agents. House Democrats are change agents. We will continue to govern in a reasonable, responsible, and results-oriented fashion and put people over politics all day and every day. Questions? I issued a statement in connection with what happened today. The vote clearly speaks for itself. It was a vote of conscience. It was overwhelming. It was decisive. And we need to move forward as a Congress to solve problems for everyday Americans.
Do you feel like Democratic leaders have said they would table the motion if she brought it up, but obviously the majority leader did. Were you expecting that, or had you had any conversations around that?
Had not had a conversation, no.
When's the last time you spoke to Speaker Johnson?
Earlier today at the statue unveiling.
Did you have any conversations with him about this particular vote?
No.
Leader Jeffries, if Republicans remain divided in their more attempts to remove the speaker, will Democrats ask for any commitments on priorities you have to come up from votes?
House Democrats are going to continue to solve problems for everyday Americans, to put people over politics, as we once again did today, and to make life better for the American people. That's our commitment. That's what we've done from the very beginning of the 118th Congress, and that's what we're going to continue to do until the very end.
Leader Jeffries, when the speaker came out after movement to conservative principles? Do you worry you might regret this at some point?
No.
Do you feel like the Speaker owes you anything for this vote?
The only thing we ask of our House Republican colleagues is for traditional Republicans to further isolate the extreme MAGA Republican wing of the GOP, which has visited nothing but chaos and dysfunction on the American people. We're just interested in making sure that the House of Representatives can continue to work in a bipartisan manner, isolate the performance artists, the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party, and the MAGA extremists, so we can get things done for the American people, for hardworking taxpayers, and for the constituents that we are all privileged to represent in the People's House.
So, Leader Jeffries, if Martin, what does that mean for your leadership?
That's a question for Republicans with respect to his leadership in terms of the Democratic House. We're going to continue to get things done for the American people. Nothing more, nothing less. Solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. Nothing more, nothing less. People over politics. Nothing more, nothing less.
So, Leader Jeffries, if Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene brings this motion up again, what will your position be?
Haven't given it a thought.
Mr. Leader, this appears to be the latest culmination of many a times where House Democrats have put up votes to help Republicans. This is obviously very different than other legislative times. Do you feel as if you all, House Democrats, in some ways, have a majority?
We are going to continue to operate under the premise that we need more common sense and less chaos in Washington, D.C. We simply want to do our jobs, get things done, make a difference in the lives of the American people, solve real problems like housing affordability, inflationary pressure, make sure we address the challenges at the border, and then go battle it out in November. As long as House Republicans continue to peddle chaos, dysfunction, and extremism, and as long as House Democrats continue to solve problems for everyday Americans and deliver real results, then the American people are going to vacate the extreme MAGA Republican majority in November. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Police Week, and so let me begin on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus to express our sincere thanks, gratitude, and appreciation for the men and women of law enforcement who wear the uniform in order to protect and serve communities all across the nation, including back home in Brooklyn. We look forward as House Democrats to continuing to find ways to strengthen the relationship between the police and the community for the good of everyone. It's also our view that we should honor the men and women of law enforcement who on January 6th sacrificed it all, put their lives on the line and at risk in order to defend the Congress, defend the Constitution, and defend the core values in our country, such as the peaceful transfer of power. There is a law on the books that requires the Congress to designate a place of significance in the Capitol to honor the men and women of law enforcement, including the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department, and many others who responded on that fateful day to put down a violent insurrection. It's time for House Republicans to honor the men and women of law enforcement who saved lives that day, including Democrats and Republicans, our staff members, and most importantly, defended the Constitution. Questions?
Chair Jeffries, can I get your reaction to Samuel Alito having flown various flags of conservative nature outside of Bush's Beach House and Piers as well as his residence here? Is that appropriate for Supreme Court justice?
Totally inappropriate. Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas are totally out of control. These individuals continue to detonate the credibility of the United States Supreme Court. In the case of Samuel Alito, he definitively needs to recuse himself from any matter pending before the United States Supreme Court that has to do with the January 6th violent insurrection. He should have no part of it. Part of the problem that we confront is that the Supreme Court has chosen to conduct itself as if the judiciary is above the law. In America, no one is above the law. That includes the Supreme Court, that includes Samuel Alito, and that includes Clarence Thomas. If the Supreme Court does not get its act under control, you can be confident that Democrats in the House of Representatives, partnering with Democrats in the United States Senate, will act the first opportunity we have to engage in thorough oversight and the consideration of imposing an ethical code of conduct on Supreme Court justices.
In Ukraine, should Ukraine be allowed to strike across the border in order to protect the party? And on a procedural note, why did you guys challenge the taking down of the words from the governor yesterday?
It's my understanding that was a decision that was made on the floor. I wasn't there at the time, but the whole episode highlights the fundamental question that runs through the 118th Congress. Are we going to choose the Constitution or the code? The Constitution or the code? We believe that our job is to champion the Constitution, defend democracy, and eradicate extremism. Apparently there are people on the other side of the aisle who want to try to silence Jim McGovern because he waxes the floor with them every time he speaks. Apparently it makes them uncomfortable and they just can't handle it, while at the same time giving Marjorie Taylor Greene free rein to conduct her outrageous behavior. This is what we're dealing with. Constitution or the code. So with respect to the Ukrainian war effort, I think that these are ongoing conversations between the Biden administration and the Ukrainian defense apparatus. I am of the view that we need to be as aggressively supportive as possible in ensuring that Ukraine can be successful in pushing back against Russian aggression for the good of the Ukrainian people, for the good of our allies in Europe, and for the good of the free world. In terms of the specifics, that is something to be worked out at the moment between the Ukrainian government and the Biden administration, which has done an incredible job to date in supporting our Democratic allies in Ukraine who have fought bravely against all odds, and we cannot rest until victory has been won. Morning, everyone. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we will find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers and deliver real results. That's exactly what we have done, repeatedly, in order to make a difference in the lives of the American people. For the balance of this Congress, over the next few months, extreme MAGA Republicans have a choice. We can either engage in a bipartisan partnership in order to get things done for everyday Americans, or the extreme MAGA Republicans can engage in political stunts and gamesmanship. Unfortunately, in connection with the appropriations process that has just begun, the extreme MAGA Republican majority has unnecessarily decided to engage in political stunts and gamesmanship. By marking up appropriations bills that have zero chance of becoming law, because they will dramatically impose cuts on the American people that will hurt their health, their safety, and their economic well-being. And extreme MAGA Republicans, in connection with the sham appropriations process that they have decided to initiate, are trying to jam right-wing policy changes down the throats of the American people, including stripping away reproductive freedom from military women, attacking the LGBTQ plus community, trying to eliminate programs that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and engaging in other unnecessary and extreme efforts that are all dead on arrival. What are we doing it for? We agreed in May of last year to a top line spending number of $1681. That's the number that was connected to the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act and our effort to avoid a catastrophic default on our nation's debt that would have crashed the economy. An agreement is an agreement is an agreement. The only thing, at the end of the day, that any of us have in this Congress is our word. There was an agreement. Top line spending number is $1681. That's the number. Nothing short of that will we ever agree to. Which means that the extreme MAGA Republicans who understand that dynamic, because we've repeatedly made it clear, are trying to shut down the government and hurt the American people in advance of the November election.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. I yield back. Morning, everyone. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to, at all times, protect the health, the safety, the national security, and the economic well-being of the American people. As part of that responsibility, we need each and every year to pass a bipartisan National Defense Authorization Act. The National Defense Authorization Act legislation pending before the Congress advanced out of the Armed Services Committee on a strongly bipartisan vote, 57-1, and contained the types of provisions that earned bipartisan support in order to make sure that we had the military readiness necessary to protect the American people in an increasingly dangerous world. The National Defense Authorization Act advanced out of the Armed Services Committee 57-1 and laid a foundation to be able to move bipartisan legislation through the House of Representatives. But the extreme MAGA Republicans are not interested in governing. They do not care about the health, the safety, the national security, and the economic well-being of the American people. And so they have hijacked the National Defense Authorization Act in order to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. Extreme MAGA Republicans are trying to, once again, march us toward a nationwide abortion ban and restrict the reproductive freedom of women serving in the military. Extreme MAGA Republicans are once again attacking the LGBTQ plus community with a particular focus on bullying transgender children. Something is really wrong with these individuals. Extreme MAGA Republicans want to undermine principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the military when Black and Latino citizens of the United States of America disproportionately serve in uniform. Something is really wrong with these individuals on the other side of the aisle. They are not serious about governing. Instead, all they care about is bending the knee to Donald Trump.
I'm Joe, and I was Joe.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's actually one of my writers. It's not
Good? All right. Good morning. Let me begin by thanking Representative Diana DeGette and Representative Barbara Lee, our extraordinary co-chairs of the pro-choice caucus, for their leadership and for gathering us here today, united as House Democrats in full, complete, and unequivocal support for reproductive freedom. Let me also thank Representative Judy Chu, Representative Kathy Manning, and Representative Susan Wild for their extraordinary leadership. 2 years ago, the far-right extreme Supreme Court majority overturned Roe v. Wade and detonated reproductive freedom for millions of American women. The catastrophic decision in Dobbs was just one part of the extreme MAGA Republican plan to impose a nationwide abortion ban, outlaw contraception, and limit access to IVF. Today, reproductive freedom is under assault throughout America. House Democrats unequivocally believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, period, full stop. It's a decision that should be between a woman, her family, her faith, and her doctors. The far right's extreme effort to take away reproductive freedom is unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American. We must stop them, and together we will stop them. House Democrats will continue to fight for nationwide access to abortion care. House Democrats will continue to fight for access to contraception. House Democrats will continue to fight for access to IVF. We will continue to stand up. We will continue to show up. We will continue to speak up. We will pass the Women's Health Protection Act. We will pass the Right to Contraception Act. We will pass IVF protection legislation. We will not rest until reproductive freedom is the law of the land for every single woman in the United States of America. It is now my honor to yield to a tremendous champion for reproductive freedom, our extraordinary whip, the Honorable Catherine Clark.
Are you watching the debate tonight, and if so, how?
I look forward to watching the debate. There are several gatherings that members of the House Democratic Caucus will be holding, including one being held by the Congressional Black Caucus that I plan to stop by this evening.
Thanks, Mr. Leader. What do you make of sort of the political fighting going on the floor right now when it comes to the amendments on these spending bills, ranging from defunding Ukraine, cutting Mayorkas' salary? There was even one that didn't make it to the floor to oppose IVF.
The extreme MAGA Republican majority is not serious about governing. They are serious about jamming their reckless far-right ideology down the throats of the American people. We've seen it from the very beginning of this Congress, and it has not let up, and it never will, because the House Republican Conference is completely and totally out of control. They needed Democrats to step in to save them from themselves and plunging this Congress into further dysfunction. And every single major piece of legislation that has moved forward in this Congress has done so because of majority support from House Democrats. That's the way it's been. That's the way it's going to be until the end of the 118th Congress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the distinguished gentleman, the ranking member of the House Administration Committee, for his tremendous leadership. I rise today in strong opposition to this extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill. The right to vote is sacred. The right to vote is special. The right to vote is sacrosanct. The right to vote is central to the integrity of our democracy. It's the foundation of the principle of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The problem is, apparently, my extreme MAGA Republican colleagues have concluded that rather than trying to win a debate in the hearts and minds of the American people anchored in ideas, they've chosen instead as a strategy to engage in voter suppression. There is no evidence that has been presented to suggest that undocumented individuals have been participating in federal elections. Republicans who investigated these allegations on their own committee have been unable to document these allegations. It is unconstitutional. It is the state of the law that only citizens can vote in federal elections. Only citizens can vote for the House of Representatives. Only citizens can vote for the United States Senate. Only citizens can vote for the presidency of the United States. So this extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill is not designed to solve any problem on behalf of the American people. It is designed to jam people up and prevent Americans from voting. The extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill will not allow Americans to vote who have a state-issued driver's license. The extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill will not allow Americans who are serving in the military to use their military ID while they're serving this country to vote. The extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill won't allow young people, college students, who are attending state universities all across the land, who have been issued college IDs through their state colleges and universities to vote. There's a big difference between the House Democratic view of free and fair elections, the peaceful transfer of power, and government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and the extreme MAGA Republican view. House Democrats want to make it easier to vote and harder to obtain weapons of war. Extreme MAGA Republicans want to make it harder to vote and easier to deploy weapons of war. Weapons, by the way, not used to hunt deer, but to hunt children in classrooms and human beings. So, the extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill has given us an opportunity again to communicate with the American people on the difference between our values, House Democrats, putting people over politics, focus on the things that matter, like lower costs, growing the middle class, ending price gouging, defending democracy, and fighting for reproductive freedom. We embrace having a debate with our extreme MAGA Republican colleagues about issues that matter. Why won't you just take your issues to the American people? Why are you trying to hide your plans that are connected to Trump's Project 2025 publicly, but then you come to the House floor and you bring this extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill that is part of the blueprint of Trump's Project 2025. You can't fool the American people. They're smarter than you think. You don't want to have a real debate about issues. Why? Because the extreme MAGA Republicans want to criminalize abortion care and impose a nationwide ban. They're trying to hide that now from the American people, stripping it from their convention platform. We know what you really want to do. You put the justices, the extreme MAGA Republicans, put the justices on the Supreme Court who detonated Roe v. Wade. That's your agenda. That's part of Trump's Project 2025. You don't want to debate the issues. You want to suppress the right to vote. Why? Because Trump's Project 2025, which is part of your platform, wants to detonate and destroy the Department of Education, which the American people don't support. You don't really want to embrace the ability for young people of every race of every part of America, including the heartland of America and rural America and Appalachia and suburban America, to get a high-quality public education. That's what Trump's Project 2025 is about. But you don't really want to have a discussion about that. You don't want that exposed to the American people. So we're on the floor right now with an extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill that does nothing because the law is already clear. Non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. And so we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that the American people can participate in free and fair elections, have the freedom to determine their own destiny by exercising their right to vote in an uncompromised and unfettered fashion, as opposed to engaging in this type of frivolous legislative activity, at best, perhaps designed as a cover already trying to set up an excuse for what may happen in November, just like what was done in advance of January 6th. I yield back. Good afternoon, everyone. This week has once again made clear that the extreme MAGA Republican agenda is to jam Trump's Project 2025 down the throats of the American people. What is Project 2025? It's dangerous, it's dastardly, and it's diabolical. Project 2025, the Trump and extreme MAGA Republican agenda, will criminalize abortion care and impose a nationwide ban on reproductive freedom. Trump's Project 2025 will end Social Security and Medicare as we know it. Trump's Project 2025 will destroy working families and the middle class in favor of the wealthy, the well-off, and well-connected corporations. Trump's Project 2025 is dangerous, diabolical, and dastardly. And we will not let the extreme MAGA Republicans hide this reckless agenda from the American people. And we need the American people to join us so we can stop it. Good evening, Democrats. It's a high honor and a distinct privilege as a Brooklynite, New Yorker, and as an American to stand before you today and unequivocally express my support for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to be the next president and vice president of the United States of America. Over the last few years, House Democrats have been hard at work, and we could not have asked for a better leader to partner with than President Joseph Robinette Biden, who will go down as one of the most consequential presidents of all time. Last month, President Biden selflessly passed the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris, who is ready, willing, and able to fight for the people. Kamala Harris is a courageous leader, a compassionate leader, and a common sense leader who will deliver real results for everyday Americans. Kamala Harris is fighting for our freedom. Kamala Harris is fighting for our families. Kamala Harris is fighting for our future. Together, let's make Kamala Harris the 47th President of the United States of America. In our great country, when you work hard and play by the rules. You deserve to earn a living wage. You deserve to have an affordable place to call home. You deserve to educate your children in a great public school that is free from gun violence. And you deserve high quality, affordable health care, and you deserve the chance to one day retire with grace and with dignity. But for far too many people in our great country, they are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. And as a result, the American dream is out of reach. Here's the thing. Extreme MAGA Republicans don't care about everyday Americans. They only care about themselves. Our approach, led by Kamala Harris and Coach Walz, is very different. We care about you, the American people. And we will fight hard to make sure that the American dream is alive and well in every single community. Now, the road ahead will not be easy, which brings me to you-know-who. Donald Trump is like an old boyfriend who you broke up with, but he just won't go away. He has spent the last 4 years spinning the block, trying to get back into a relationship with the American people. Bro, we broke up with you for a reason. Trump was the mastermind of the GOP tax scam, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1% in America. Trump failed our country during the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump is a chaos agent who is focused on himself, not the American people. Trump tried to destroy our democracy by lying about the election and inciting a violent mob to attack the Capitol. Trump put 3 extreme justices on the Supreme Court who destroyed Roe v. Wade. We broke up with you for a reason. Donald Trump can spin the block all he wants, but there's no reason for us to ever get back together. Been there, done that, we're not going back. Kamala Harris and House Democrats will always put people over politics. Kamala Harris and House Democrats will lower costs and grow the middle class. Kamala Harris and House Democrats will fix our broken immigration system and secure the border. Kamala Harris and House Democrats will strengthen the relationship between the police and the community. Kamala Harris and House Democrats will continue to combat the climate crisis with the fierce urgency of now. Kamala Harris and House Democrats will protect Social Security, protect Medicare, protect Medicaid, protect the Affordable Care Act, protect working families, protect small businesses, protect the middle class, protect free enterprise, protect our children, protect our seniors, protect our veterans, protect our unions, protect our dreamers, and always protect a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. The extreme MAGA Republicans want to divide us. But the Constitution promises equal protection under the law. We are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Together, 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 let's build a brighter future for our children and our grandchildren. In the Old Testament, book of Psalms, the scripture tells us that weeping may endure during the long night, but joy will come in the morning. Here's how we do it. Strategize on Sunday. Meet the moment on Monday. Take it to them on Tuesday. Work it out on Wednesday. Thank the Lord on Thursday. Fight the power on Friday. Set it off on Saturday. Get a few hours of sleep, wake up the next day, and do it all over again until joy, joy, joy comes in the morning. Now there's only 76 days left. There are only 76 days left. We must continue to speak up. We must continue to show up. We must continue to stand up, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans. And when we do, nothing can stop Kamala Harris from becoming the 47th President of the United States of America. Nothing can stop House Democrats from taking back the majority. Nothing can stop the American people from continuing our march toward a more perfect union. Nothing can stop us. We're all the way up. God bless you. God bless Kamala Harris. May God bless the United States of America. Good morning, Michigan. Isn't it good to be at the Democratic National Convention right now? Are you ready to make sure that we elect Kamala Harris, the 47th President of the United States of America? Are you ready to keep the Senate and elect Alyssa Slotkin? Are you ready to make sure that we win back control of the United States House of Representatives? What an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you, and so thankful for the work that you do in the great state of Michigan, one of our critical states in the battle for our future. I want to thank Debbie Dingell for her generous words of introduction, for her incredible leadership in the United States House of Representatives. You have an amazing delegation, of course, with Debbie and Hillary and Haley and all of the members who serve. Alyssa Slotkin, who's on her way to the United States Senate. We're going to miss a lot. Alyssa, now just so you know, when a member of the House runs for the United States Senate, we consider that a demotion, not a promotion. But nonetheless, she is succeeding a giant, and we're so thankful for Chairwoman Senator Stabenow for her incredible service to Michigan and to the United States Senate and to the United States of America. So transformative in so many areas, and we're thankful for her. Good to see Sri, another important member of the delegation. Thankful for your governor, your lieutenant governor, and all of your statewide elected officials. Let me simply say that I also, of course, wanted to acknowledge and celebrate someone who is really a treasure in the United States House of Representatives. Someone who's been a great member of Congress, someone who has been a friend, a colleague, an ally, someone who I came into Congress with, someone who has really become a good friend almost from the very beginning of my journey. And let me tell you, I use that phrase about Dan Kildee, my good friend, in the real sense of the word, not the congressional sense of the word. Because you know, from time to time, you'll see members of Congress on the House floor, and we often say, my good friend, the distinguished gentleman from the great state of California, or my good friend, the distinguished gentlelady from the great state of Florida. I'm amongst some important people, so let me let y'all in on a secret. Most of the time, you hear members of Congress use the phrase, my good friend, We don't mean it, y'all. But when it comes to Dan Kildee, I absolutely mean it. He's a good friend, not just to me, to the House Democratic Caucus, to the communities he's privileged to represent in the great state of Michigan, to the Congress, to the country, to the Constitution. We're thankful for the incredible leadership of Dan Kildee, who has made a difference year after year throughout his career, in the Congress, before the Congress, on the ground, in Washington, for the people in Flint and Saginaw, and those who he's been privileged to serve. We're going to miss Dan Kildee, but he's made a difference with his intellect and his heart and his soul and his compassion and his desire to do what is necessary to improve the quality of life of the people that he has been privileged to serve. So I just wanted to drop by. Thank you for sending Dan Kildee to us. You know, I had the opportunity to campaign with Dan when his district was changed and he was put into a hyper-competitive district, but he approached it with the joy that we're also seeing now from the top of our ticket. Didn't lament the fact that after 10 years things changed on him, just dove right in, because Dan Kildee cares about the people, cares about the work. So I said, Dan, where are you taking me when I come into your district? He said, well, you've been to Flint before, so I'm going to take you to Saginaw. I said, okay. I said, that's great. I'm looking forward to going to Saginaw. It was on a Sunday. Went to a few churches. But I get to Saginaw. First thing I see is the home of Stevie Wonder. I'm like, wow, Stevie Wonder's from Saginaw? And then I pass something else, and it says Saginaw, where Serena Williams was born. And I'm like, whoa, Saginaw? And then I walk into a church. We did about 3 church services, and there was a very distinguished woman who was seated in the front row, and she saw me. She said, oh, Hakeem Jeffries is here. I was very surprised that she knew who I was. I said, Dan, who's that? They said, well, that's Mayor Ham, the mother of Darwin Ham, who's the coach of the Lakers. I said, wait, Darvin Ham's from Saginaw as well? And so I'm just impressed. I'm just impressed, not just with Saginaw, though I was very impressed that day, but with what the people of Michigan represent. True-blooded Americans who care about our country in the heartland, represent the American dream. And let me end by just simply saying I saw it when I was in the district, saw it when I was with Alyssa Slotkin and campaigned for her, and she's going to be a great member of the United States Senate. Saw it when I came in for Hillary and others with Debbie leading the great event, and Haley when we were in Detroit. Shree was there. That we believe, and this is what this room represents, that in America, our democracy, our country, our diversity is a strength. It is not a weakness. We truly are a nation of immigrants, a gorgeous mosaic of people from throughout the world. Thankful for Sean Fain, of course, and the UAW. A gorgeous mosaic of people from throughout the world. We are white, we are black, we are Latino, we are Asian, we are Native American. We are Christian, we are Jewish, we are Muslim, we are Hindu, we are religious, we are secular, we are gay, we are straight, we are women, we are men, we are young, we are older, we are citizens, we are dreamers. Out of many, we are one. That's what makes America a great country, and no matter what kind of xenophobic behavior is taking place on the other side of the aisle, we're not going to let them take that away from us. Not now, not ever. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Why would a Democratic Republican put a bill on the floor that might not even have the votes to pass the House, and certainly will see no daylight in the United States Senate.
Is there anything else about the CR that you don't like other than the statement?
The continuing resolution effectively cuts $10 billion in military readiness, $12 billion from our veterans, also $1 billion from Social Security Administration, and will hurt the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people. Republicans are trying to drive us into a government shutdown that will hurt everyday Americans because they want to jam Trump's Project 2025 agenda down the throats of the American people. That's what this is all about.
Do you have any safety concerns about Trump posting about jailing political adversaries?
We'll let Vice President Harris deal with his recklessness later on today at the debate.
Is there anything you hope to
unanimous in opposition to this bill?
You have to talk to Catherine Clark about that. The bill is going nowhere, though. That's clear.
What do you hope to see tonight at the debate from Harris?
Well, Vice President Harris is going to articulate a forward-looking, inclusive agenda to make life better for everyday Americans and solve problems for hard-working American taxpayers and create a clear contrast to the chaos, dysfunction, and extremism that Donald Trump will visit upon the American people if he ever gets close to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
Yesterday, on 9/11, War of America was spread 9/11 conspiracy theories. Spent part of the day with Donald Trump. How did you work on it?
It was shocking and irresponsible and offensive to the thousands of people who lost their lives on September 11th, including hundreds of brave first responders, members of the NYPD, FDNY, and others who raced toward the danger in order to help people escape the danger and lost their lives as a result of it. Donald Trump is a conspiracy theory peddling, racial arsonist, and pathological liar. That's just the reality of the situation. And it's being visited upon the American people. And the fact that on September 11th, this sacred day, he would bring a 9/11 conspiracy theorist to participate in events during this solemn commemoration should shock the conscience of all decent Americans, and I believe that it does just that. Let's be clear. Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden are responsible for the horrors of September 11th. No one else. No one else. No one else.
We're talking about divisions here, but let me talk a little bit about bipartisan cohesion here. The China Committee, a number of bills on the floor this week, that committee has generally worked in a bipartisan fashion. What are the things, however, that you might be disappointed in, that you would have liked to have seen them do better, or go further? And do you think that some of the things, some of the interests that Republicans have in these issues regarding China are steeped in racism or gender?
Seems to me that throughout much of this Congress, the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party has worked in a constructive fashion. Unfortunately, many of the bills that have been on the floor this week have been more connected to xenophobic efforts by extreme MAGA Republicans to try to divide the country as opposed to trying to unite the country. This is not an unfamiliar thing. More than 60 million Americans saw the contrast between the Vice President's vision for America and the former President's vision for America on full display. We as Democrats, led by President Biden and Vice President Harris, want to move the country forward, bring people together, and solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. Extreme MAGA Republicans, led by the former president, who continues to order members of the House Republican Conference around, and in sycophantic fashion, many of them continue to fall in line, are trying to turn back the clock, divide America, and exercise complete control over the American people through Trump's Project 2025 agenda. That's a clear vision. So whatever happens on the House floor this week, next week, the week thereafter, should be viewed in that context.
We've seen a lot of recent ads from House Republicans pushing back on Democratic attacks on abortion rights, saying that they don't want to ban abortion nationwide, that they support IVF. I'm curious your response to Republicans trying to distance themselves from some of their more political process.
Extreme MAGA Republicans are on the run because they know they have gone too far. But they are lying to the American people when it comes to reproductive freedom. And the American people understand it. Kamala Harris, Senate Democrats, House Democrats, support a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. We support family planning. We support access to birth control. And we support IVF. Donald Trump and House Republicans detonated Roe v. Wade and created a circumstance in America, as articulately and powerfully outlined by Vice President Kamala Harris on numerous occasions, where reproductive freedom has been ripped away from tens of millions of women in America, and they want it to continue. Trump's Project 2025 is in part about surveillance of the pregnancies and miscarriages of women in the United States of America. If you want to surveil women in this country and their pregnancies and their miscarriages and their health conditions related to reproductive events in their life, why do you want to do it? It's because at the end of the day, Republicans want to criminalize abortion care, impose a nationwide abortion ban, enact government-mandated pregnancies, and outlaw access to things like birth control and in vitro fertilization. Donald Trump doesn't even know what IVF stands for, and we saw that the other day. He doesn't even know what IVF stands for. And we're supposed to believe that they're champions in this area? It's laughable. Speaker, I also thank the distinguished once and future chair of the House Committee on Appropriations, Rosa DeLauro, for her leadership and for yielding to me. I rise today in strong opposition to the extreme MAGA Republican effort to shut down the government and hurt everyday Americans. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have suggested that this is anti-woke week. It's not anti-woke week, it's Project 2025 week. Because at the end of the day, my extreme MAGA Republican colleagues are determined to jam Trump's Project 2025 down the throats of the American people. Now, from the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we will find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for the American people, deliver real results, and solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. And that is what we have repeatedly done. House Democrats have repeatedly governed in the minority as if we were in the majority, finding bipartisan common ground to deliver for everyday Americans. And we're prepared to do that once again. But this extreme MAGA Republican shutdown bill that is on the floor of the House of Representatives today is not a serious effort to meet the needs of the American people in terms of their health, their safety, their national security, in their economic well-being. The extreme MAGA Republicans' shutdown bill that's on the floor today would shortchange our veterans by $12 billion. That's a Project 2025 objective. $12 billion shortchanging our veterans who have been suffering from painful exposure to toxic substances, burn pits, and Agent Orange. People who have served our country. We should stand by them in the way that they've stood by us. But this extreme MAGA Republican shutdown bill will shut out the veterans of the United States of America. Extreme MAGA Republican shutdown bill will shortchange the administration of Social Security here in the United States of America. Why? Because one of the goals of Project 2025 effectively is to end Social Security and Medicare as we know it. And so there's no circumstance where we can support such legislation that will hurt the well-being of older Americans all across the United States of America. These are people upon whose shoulders we stand. Extreme MAGA Republican shutdown bill will shortchange everyday Americans who've been suffering harm from extreme weather events all across America, in blue states, purple states, and red states. Shortchange our taxpayers by $25 billion. That's unacceptable. That's unserious. That's unconscionable for people who have had their life upended. Now, in the context of whether we are capable to reach a bipartisan resolution, the answer to that is pretty clear, because there is already an agreement connected to the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act, passed by both houses of Congress last May, signed into law by President Joe Biden, that sets top-line spending numbers for fiscal year 2025. And it also enters into an agreement across the parties that says there will be no partisan policy riders attached to an appropriations bill. So why are we here right now with an extreme MAGA Republican shutdown bill that includes elements, partisan elements, right-wing elements, extreme elements of Trump's Project 2025? That's a breach of an agreement that we all reached, connected to the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act. This is a shutdown effort. That's not hype. That's not hysteria. That's not hyperbole. It's history. Because in the DNA of extreme MAGA Republicans has consistently been an effort to make extreme ransom demands of the American people. And if those extreme ransom demands are not met, you shut down the government. That's history. In the 1990s, extreme MAGA Republicans shut down the government because they were determined to end Medicaid as we know it. In 2013, extreme MAGA Republicans shut the government down for 14 days. And the demand at that point was to repeal President Obama's signature legislative accomplishment, the Affordable Care Act, that benefits more than 100 million Americans. In 2018 and 19, extreme MAGA Republicans shut the government down for a record 35 days. What was the ransom demand in that particular moment? Well, the former president and Republicans in the House and the Senate demanded that the American taxpayer fund Trump's ineffective medieval border wall, notwithstanding the fact that the promise was clearly made that Mexico would pay for that wall. And because we were defending taxpayer interests, you shut the government down for 35 days. And so the notion that we're here today facing another extreme MAGA Republican-driven shutdown, concerned about it. The only thing standing between a shutdown and the American people, not hype, not hysteria, not hyperbole, not a hypothetical, it's history. And so we're simply asking our traditional Republican colleagues to break with the extreme wing of your party, break with the extremism around a national abortion ban, break with the extremism connected to Trump's Project 2025, which, by the way, includes government surveillance of pregnancies and miscarriages. No circumstance that we can ever support such an outrageous agenda. We're asking our traditional Republican colleagues to stand up for working families, the middle class, older Americans, our children, our veterans, and people from all across the land. In urban America, rural America, small town America, the heartland of America, suburban America, exurban America, stand up for the American people, as opposed to standing up for massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and big corporations. That's the other part of Project 2025. This is not anti-woke week. It's extreme MAGA Republican Project 2025 week. And House Democrats right now, the only thing standing between Project 2025 and the extreme agenda you want to jam down the throats of the American people and keeping the government open and doing the right thing for everyday Americans. Vote no on this extreme MAGA Republican shutdown bill and partner with us to do the right thing for the American people. I yield back.
Gentlemen.
It's a laughable suggestion by the former president, Donald Trump, that he's going to win New York. He will not win New York, and it will not be close. And for the life of me, many of us can't figure out why the so-called swing seat Republicans in New York have tethered themselves so closely to Donald Trump. The explanation is that they've been exposed as extreme MAGA Republicans and have stopped trying to pretend to be moderate, because that hasn't worked. And so we, under the leadership of Governor Kathy Hochul, in partnership with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, feel as though we are prepared to do what's necessary to make our best possible case to voters in all of the contested congressional elections in New York. Governor Hochul should be commended for leading a significant effort to strengthen the New York State Democratic Party, and in partnership with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's done an incredible job, stand up a coordinated campaign for the first time in modern New York history that rivals anything that we've seen in battleground states across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Now, I want to talk about Amber Thurman, the black woman who died of sepsis after being denied medical care due to Georgia's abortion ban. Now, she was only 28 years old and left behind a young child. She's just one of many who has suffered greatly due to the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. But what message can you send those who feel hopeless around matters of reproductive freedom?
And my heartfelt condolences go out to Amber's family. This should never have happened, and it is a direct result of Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republican efforts to kill the protections of Roe v. Wade, and now to pursue a national abortion ban. It's part of their agenda. Their agenda is very clear. The extreme MAGA Republican agenda is very clear. A national abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025, and massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and big corporations. That's their agenda. And the hope that the American people should feel on this issue is that as Democrats, led by President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, we believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. We support access to contraception and birth control. We support IVF. The extreme MAGA Republicans do not. And as soon as we have the opportunity to act, House Democrats will swiftly pass the Women's Health Protection Act that will restore the protections of Roe v. Wade and beyond in terms of access to contraception, freedom of movement and travel, as well as access to IVF. This is in the hands of the American people over the next 47 days. And it's clear that the American people stand on the side of reproductive freedom. Thanks. Chad.
The cap on salt sunsets next year, as it stands right now. If you become speaker, which you certainly want to be, would under any circumstances would you put legislation on the House floor that would either cap in part or in whole salt going forward?
We are committed to making sure we reverse the damage that was done by the extreme MAGA Republicans in connection with the 2017 GOP tax scam, which capped the state and local tax deduction. And for many middle-class families in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, and California, as well as other parts of the country, all but eliminated the state and local tax deduction in a meaningful way and resulted in tax increases for middle-class families, in some cases by thousands of dollars. The irony of all ironies is that the former president shows up in Nassau County yesterday with House Republicans like Congressman D'Esposito, Elise Stefanik, couldn't even pronounce her name correctly. How much did that hurt? And so many others who were responsible for detonating the state and local tax deduction or have failed to restore it and now want to claim that they're going to come to the rescue. They were the arsonists who burned down the state and local tax deduction, and they have no credibility in trying to pretend right now that they'll be the firefighters. We will work in a bipartisan way to restore the state and local tax deduction. But here's why the November election is so important on this issue. The state and local tax deduction cap will lapse on its own as of December 31st, 2025. It will lapse on its own. No action is required. And so who has the gavels on January 3rd in the 119th Congress will determine whether the state and local tax deduction is restored in full or whether it continues to be capped in a way that hurts middle-class families. Good afternoon, everyone. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have repeatedly made clear that we will find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues on any issue whenever and wherever possible in order to make a difference in the lives of the American people. And throughout this Congress, House Democrats have governed from the minority as if we were in the majority in order to deliver real results for everyday Americans and to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. Our commitment remains the same. But we need traditional Republicans to break with MAGA extremists and partner with us so we can keep the government open and meet the needs of the American people. What's the challenge? Donald Trump has ordered extreme MAGA Republicans in the House to shut the government down unless they can jam parts of Trump's Project 2025 agenda down the throats of the American people. That's a non-starter. We will not let the American people be extorted by extreme MAGA Republicans who are trying to turn back the clock, undermine freedom, and suppress the vote because they don't believe they can make a compelling case to the American people on November 5th. Questions? Haven't really followed that couch situation. I've stayed away from that one.
Have you had talks with your conference about being careful about, seeing something online and exasperating it or sharing it?
From our standpoint, we continue to keep the focus on issues related to making a difference in the lives of the American people, lowering costs, addressing the housing affordability crisis, growing the middle class, fighting for reproductive freedom, and defending democracy. We also will contrast that with the Republican agenda, which is a nationwide abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025, and massive tax cuts for big corporations. There's no need for us ever to engage in conspiracy theory peddling or propagating misinformation because on the issues, Democrats are right and Republicans are wrong. We're still waiting for some clarity from my Republican colleagues as to why they continue to entertain conspiracy theories, attack people in ways that don't relate to issues, but relate to people's race or gender or ethnicity or gender identification, as opposed to debating us in the arena of ideas. The reason that many Republicans continue to engage in lies, misinformation, and conspiracy theories is because they have a horrible track record of accomplishment. Can anyone in America name a single thing that House Republicans have done on their own to make life better for the American people? Can anyone name a single thing during the 118th Congress? The answer is no. They have a horrible track record of accomplishment. Instead, they visited chaos, dysfunction, and extremism on the American people. And their vision for the future is deeply unpopular, which is why they're running away from their extreme agenda. But House Republicans can run. We will not let them hide from their desire to impose a nationwide abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025 agenda, or big tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and big corporations. We will not let them hide, and we're going to contest them in the arena of ideas. Thanks.
So have you talked directly with Johnson about what this next play might be, or is it just anticipated that we're waiting for the Senate here? I mean, is there any negotiation at all in terms of saying, okay, I can deliver this many numbers on this great CR, nothing like that?
The House has a responsibility to keep the government open and meet the needs of the American people. Pursuant to the United States Constitution, all appropriations bills have to initiate in the House of Representatives. The extreme MAGA Republicans are determined to shut the government down and hurt everyday Americans because they are on an ideological crusade. This is not anti-woke week. It's Project 2025 week. In fact, every week is Project 2025 week because that is the extreme MAGA Republican agenda. And we're determined to stand up for the American people. I have not spoken to Speaker Johnson today or subsequent to the collapse of the House Republican shutdown bill, but time is short. Our staffs are in communication with each other, and what occurs over the next few days will be determinative as to whether we can find the common ground necessary to fund the government, avoid a shutdown, and meet the needs of the American people. This should not be complicated. In May of last year, more than 300 members of the House of Representatives, including a majority of House Republicans, supported the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act, which set top-line spending numbers for fiscal year 2025. And we all agreed that partisan policy writers would be left out of any appropriations bills. House Republicans are violating their own agreement. Why? Because they want to jam Trump's Project 2025 agenda down the throats of the American people, and in the alternative, shut down the government. That's reckless and irresponsible. We will continue to stand up for the American people.
That include money for the Secret Service?
Just to follow up on Chad's question, you said you haven't spoken to Speaker Johnson since the bill on his proposal failed last night. Can you characterize more generally what your conversations with the Speaker have been on this? Or are you guys on the same page about how this ultimately will end? Does the Speaker understand that this is leading towards a clean CR?
Any private conversation with Speaker Johnson will remain private. However, there's nothing inconsistent between what I may say to Speaker Johnson privately and what we are saying publicly. This is not complicated. We have already reached an agreement connected to the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act with respect to the top-line spending number for fiscal year 2025. And we will not accept any partisan right-wing policy changes to current law. That was an agreement that we reached last year, and we expect that agreement to be kept. We are also, as House Democrats, not going to allow Republicans to cut $12 billion in funding for veterans' health care that would undermine our ability to meet the needs of veterans who are suffering painful exposure to toxic substances, burn pits, and Agent Orange. As House Democrats, we will not let extreme MAGA Republicans shortchange our military readiness to the tune of $6 billion. And we will also not let House Republicans fail to meet the needs of the American people who are suffering from the harmful impact of extreme weather events by shortchanging the American people by $25 billion. And so there's nothing inconsistent with that public position that I might otherwise say to Speaker Johnson privately. Thanks. Third row. Yeah.
So as Democrats look toward potentially being in the majority in 2025, you'll have a lot of committee chairs who have been in their spots for a significant amount of time. Do you think the caucus should consider putting term limits on chairs just so that they could only serve, say, like 3 terms like the Republicans have or something similar?
We're focused right now on making sure we keep the government open, avoid a extreme MAGA Republican shutdown that will hurt everyday Americans, and then we'll be off throughout the country to make our case to the American people. Under the leadership of Chairman Pete Aguilar, the Committee on Caucus Procedures will convene over the next few weeks to receive input from members about possible rules changes. That is the process that has been put into place for decades. That's the process that will continue in the 118th Congress as we prepare for the next term.
Leader Jeffries, thank you very much. We've seen tons of chaos, whether it was the speaker fight or whether it was, potential government shutdowns, Ukraine. Is this will you be taught, will Democrats be making the case that this kind of chaos is a preview of what government under a Trump presidency would look like, and how are you going to be making that case to the American public?
Government under Trump presidency will look like what Project 2025 envisions. That is the blueprint for Donald Trump's presidency and the extreme MAGA Republican effort to exercise total control over the lives of the American people in ways that will hurt working families and the middle class and benefit billionaires and wealthy corporations. That's the Trump agenda. And they are not hiding it because they put it into a 922-page document for all of America to process. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yesterday, House Democrats held a successful hearing under the leadership of the Steering and Policy Committee in partnership with the House Democratic Caucus Task Force on Trump's Project 2025, discussing the dangers of the extreme MAGA Republican effort through Trump's Project 2025 to exercise total control over the lives of the American people. Extreme MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump can run from Project 2025, but we will never let them hide, because it is the extreme MAGA Republican plan for taking over the federal government in an extreme way and jamming their right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. When it comes to extreme MAGA Republicans exercising total and complete control over everyday Americans, they don't simply have concepts. They have a plan. They have a detailed plan. They have a 922-page plan. It's called Trump's Project 2025. It will criminalize abortion care, impose a nationwide abortion ban, and require government surveillance of pregnancies and miscarriages. Trump's Project 2025 will end overtime pay for hardworking American taxpayers. Trump's Project 2025 will end Medicare as we know it. Trump's Project 2025 will decimate Head Start, and Trump's Project 2025 will abolish the Department of Education and end public education in America as we know it. Those are just the highlights. I congratulate the members of the Steering and Policy Committee, the Democratic Campaign Committee on the outside, for making sure that the American people have the information to process what Trump's Project 2025 is all about. And we will continue to make sure that that information is available to the American people as they process our future. Later on this afternoon, we will have a continuing resolution that is before the American people that will keep the government open, prevent a reckless Republican shutdown, and make sure that we meet the needs of the American people over the next few months. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we will find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues on any issue whenever and wherever possible in order to make life better for the American people, deliver real results, and solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. We have repeatedly done it. House Democrats made sure we protected the full faith and credit of the United States of America and avoided a catastrophic default on our debt. House Democrats made sure that we enacted the National Defense Authorization Act into law. House Democrats have now avoided a reckless Republican government shutdown on 5 different occasions to make sure that we meet the needs of the American people and keep the government open. House Democrats provided the votes necessary to ensure that our democratic ally, Ukraine, continued to have the resources to defend democracy, defend freedom, defend truth, and push back against Russian aggression. House Democrats have repeatedly governed in the minority as if we were in the majority in order to meet the needs of the American people. That is the story of the 118th Congress. Questions?
Republicans, both House and Senate, have consistently pointed out to us this week that the Senate has not passed a single appropriations bill, despite the bills passing out of committee on a mostly bipartisan basis. Do you think Leader Schumer should bring these bills to the floor? And if they don't act on these bills, are you concerned we're going to see an omnibus?
House Republicans have failed to do their job repeatedly with respect to the appropriations process, and have not even been able to move a majority of appropriations bills that they authored without Democratic input onto the House floor and over to the Senate. What is in front of us at the moment is a bipartisan continuing resolution to keep the government open, meet the needs of the American people, and give us the opportunity to resolve any spending issues this calendar year under the leadership on our side of Rosa DeLauro. This is not a complicated thing at this moment in time. We entered into a bipartisan agreement connected to the Fiscal Responsibility Act that was supported overwhelmingly by Democrats and Republicans last May. The Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act sets top-line spending numbers for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. It increases both defense spending and non-defense discretionary spending by 1% for fiscal year 2025, and makes clear that there should be no poison pill policy changes included in the appropriations process. That is a framework to get things done for the American people. The problem is that extreme MAGA Republicans in the House have broken their own agreement, which, by the way, was an agreement that they demanded we enter into in order to avoid a catastrophic default on our nation's debt. And then they want to turn around, break their own agreement, and lecture America about what is or is not happening in Washington, D.C. The American people are not fooled. Can anyone name a single thing that extreme MAGA Republicans in the House have been able to do on their own to make life better for the American people? A single thing, just one. Can the American people name a single thing that extreme MAGA Republicans have done to make their lives better? Zip zero. You can't. Nothing. And so that is a track record that will be presented to the American people. And the only path forward that has been available in this Congress to make life better for the American people has been as a result of leadership from House Democrats and partnership with traditional Republicans who we have urged to break from the extremists in the House Republican Conference. Thank you.
Thank you.